In the rugged frontier lands of the American West, far from the noise of growing towns, stood a quiet valley known as Silver Valley. It was a beautiful place, rolling green grass, clear water streams, and wide skies that stretched forever. At the far end of that valley stood a small ranch, not large, not rich, but honest. The ranch belonged to a widow named Olivia Harper. Olivia lived there with her 2 children, a young boy named Daniel and his little sister Emily. Just months earlier, Olivia's husband had been murdered, killed by a group of ruthless outlaws passing through the valley. The loss nearly destroyed her, but the frontier was not a place for surrender. So Olivia stood back up. She took control of the ranch, fed the cattle, paid the cowhands, and raised her children the best she could. Most people in town admired her strength, but strength alone wasn't always enough. Recently, someone had begun stealing her cattle. One night, 2 cows vanished. Another night, 4 horses disappeared. Olivia rode out herself trying to track the thieves, but the rustlers were clever. They vanished into the hills before she could find them. Her cowhands were good men, hard-working, loyal, but none of them were fighters, and the frontier could be merciless to those who couldn't defend themselves. Olivia had tried to hire a gunslinger once, but the man turned out to be worse than the rustlers, a greedy drifter who thought a widow would be easy to manipulate. Olivia sent him away before trouble began. But now, the cattle were still disappearing, and if it continued much longer, the ranch would collapse. Many miles away, another rider was crossing the mountain trails. Samuel Cole, a lone cowboy, a wanderer of the frontier. The mountain air was cool that evening. The setting sun painted the rocky cliffs with golden light. Samuel smiled slightly. Now this here's a fine place to rest. He rode down into a small grassy valley, untied his horse, and let the animal graze peacefully. Samuel built a small fire. Soon the smell of roasting meat filled the quiet air. After eating, he poured himself a cup of strong black coffee. The stars slowly appeared above the mountains. Samuel tipped his hat over his eyes and fell asleep beside the fire. Morning came suddenly, with gunshots. Samuel's eyes opened instantly. His hand moved straight to his revolver. Another shot echoed across the valley. Samuel moved quietly through the trees towards the sound. When he reached the ridge, he saw the trouble. An elderly gold miner rode desperately along the trail. 3 armed riders blocked his path. "Hand over the gold, old man, or you won't be leaving this valley alive." The miner trembled. "That gold is all I got." A gunshot rang out, but it wasn't the rustlers. Samuel fired from the ridge. One rider's hat flew off as the bullet struck his shoulder. Gunfire exploded across the canyon. Samuel rode straight into the fight, his revolver flashing. 2 of the rustlers were wounded, the 3rd panicked. Moments later, all 3 fled down the canyon. The miner stared in disbelief. "Son, you saved my life." Samuel nodded quietly. But then he noticed something. Blood. A bullet had struck his shoulder during the fight. Samuel tore a strip of cloth and tied it tightly around the wound. The old miner reached into his pouch. "You earned this." He pressed a small piece of raw gold into Samuel's hand. "Take it. Don't argue with an old miner." Samuel finally accepted it with a small smile. After escorting the miner to a safer trail, Samuel continued on his way. But the wound was worse than he thought. Hours later, the blood loss began to slow him. the world around him blurred. When he finally reached the valley near Olivia's ranch, he could barely stay in the saddle. Then suddenly, Samuel slipped from his horse, and darkness took him. When Samuel Cole opened his eyes again, the world felt quiet. The smell of fresh wood and warm stew filled the air. He slowly turned his head. His shoulder was wrapped in clean bandages, and sitting beside the bed was Olivia. "Well, looks like you're finally awake." Samuel tried to sit up, but winced from the pain. "Easy there. You lost a fair bit of blood." Samuel looked confused. "Where am I?" "My ranch. One of my cowhands found you lying out near the trail." "I'm Olivia Harper." Samuel gave a faint nod. "Samuel Cole." For the next several days, Samuel remained at the ranch, recovering. Olivia took care of his wound with quiet determination, and soon the ranch began to feel almost like home. Daniel and Emily were especially curious about the stranger. "Mr. Samuel, is it true you fought bandits?" Samuel chuckled. "Once or twice." The children quickly started calling him Uncle Samuel, and Samuel didn't seem to mind at all. Once his strength returned, Samuel began helping around the ranch, fixing fences, repairing stalls, and riding the pasture lines. One afternoon, a cowhand approached him quietly. "Mr. Cole, we've been losing horses lately." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Rustlers? Most likely." That evening, Samuel spoke with Olivia. "Don't you worry none. Folks stealing from your ranch, they'll regret it." A few nights later, the rustlers returned, but this time, Samuel was waiting. Shadows moved across the pasture as the thieves tried to drive away the horses. Then suddenly, Samuel stepped from behind the fence. "Evening, boys." Gunfire erupted across the dark ranch. 2 rustlers fled instantly, but the one who was dragged from his horse by the cowhands didn't enjoy the conversation that followed. "You folks made a big mistake. Our boss won't like this. He'll be back." The warning stayed in Samuel's mind. The next morning, he rode into town. It was a small frontier town, dusty streets and wooden buildings. Samuel stepped into the saloon. One drink, a few quiet questions, and the truth began to appear. A rustling gang, led by a man named Calder Boone, had been stealing cattle across the valley, and Olivia's ranch was their favorite target. Samuel returned to the ranch that evening. There was no time to waste. He gathered the cowhands together. If those rustlers come back, they won't find easy prey. Over the next few days, Samuel trained them how to handle rifles, how to defend the barns, how to fight like real cowboys. Then one night, dust appeared on the horizon. A large group of riders approached. Calder Boone had come for revenge. Samuel stood beside the ranch gate. "Hold your ground." The rustlers charged. Gunfire exploded across the ranch. Samuel's revolver flashed again and again. The cowhands fought bravely. Several rustlers fell from their saddles. The rest finally broke and fled into the night. The ranch was safe. In the days that followed, Samuel tracked the rustlers' hidden camp and brought back every stolen horse and cow he could find. Time passed peacefully once again, but the frontier never let a man stay still forever. One quiet morning, Samuel saddled his horse. Olivia stepped onto the porch. "You're leaving?" Samuel smiled gently. "Reckon the roads call it again." Daniel and Emily ran up to him. "Uncle Samuel, will you come back someday?" "Maybe, if the trail leads me here again." Samuel tipped his hat to Olivia, then turned his horse toward the open frontier. And once again, the lone cowboy rode into the unknown.